Here's a look at a recap of your markets on this Friday, the 8th day of August. As of 2 o'clock, the negotiated feedlot trade not quite turning out the way most of the folks, including myself, probably expected this week. Futures markets on Friday pretty much tanked on profit taking. There was absolutely nothing fundamentally to justify what happened, just profit taking. They were down sharply, and we'll talk more about that later. Even though they had big losses today, they were higher for the week, and box beef cutout values were sharply higher for the week, but feedlot managers just couldn't seem to get much traction, despite all the fundamentals still being in their favor. The wind just kind of was let out of the balloon by the traders in Chicago today. As of 2 o'clock, been about 23,703 head of negotiated sales. Texas and Kansas didn't move anything today. Their earlier week totals about 1,200 head, 235 to 237. Iowa reported 10,780 head as of the 2 o'clock cutoff time. Live sales 240 to 242, a few up to 245. Dress sales range from 378 to 385. In Nebraska, 7,717 head, 242 to mostly 245. Some dress sales at 378 to 385. So most of those sales would be considered steady to weak. Probably some trade, very likely there was some trade that took place after that 2 o'clock, because that 23,000 isn't enough for packers. Even as they continue to cut slaughter, they have to have some more cattle than that. So definitely some trade took place after 2 o'clock, but we're not going to get to figure out what that was until Monday. Those box beef cutout values, choice closed down a dime for the day at $378.84, but it was up $15.62 from last Friday. Select $355.09, up $1.34 for the day, up $14.59 for the week. On Friday, the choice select spread $23.75, volume 103 loads of cuts, trimmings, and grinds. Before we take a look at what happened at the auction barns around the state this week, we'll go ahead and look at those futures and get that over with for the day. Live cattle, $6.20 lower on the August, $232.55. October down $6.25 at $225.97. December $227.92 down $5.70. Feeder cattle, August $239.40. August at $339.40, September at $340.37, October $339.22. All those feeder cattle contracts down $9.25 for the day. Now, that being said, even with today's sharp losses for the week, live cattle were up $230 to $385. Feeder cattle were $438 to $878 higher for the week. Lean hogs, August was up 12 cents at $108.90. October down 25 at $90.67. December 83.77 down 2. For the week, those lean hogs were 62 cents to $2.20 higher. At the auction barns around the state, our tracking measures continue setting new records. The Missouri Stocker formula, based on a 550-pound steer through the auction barns in the state of Missouri, 414.96, an all-time new record. The CME Feeder Cattle Index, based on an 800-pound steer up through the 12-state feeding region on Friday, 337.21. That's an all-time new record as well. Through the auction barns around the state this week, pretty typical summer volume this week. With the cool down from last week, we did see a few cattle start to move. Granted, it's pretty warm out again, but nothing like it's been the last several weeks. About 26,000 head of cattle went through the auction barns around the state, and pretty much every barn everywhere had some kind of new records on some weight class established this week. Still some just absolutely incredible sales occurring out there. Callaway Livestock Center on Monday, they sold 27 head of 525-pound steers at $459. The average statewide on those light 5 weights this week at $438. Kingsville sold 52 head of 570-pound steers at $445. Joplin Regional Stockyards sold 32 head, 610-pound steers at $425. Mocan Livestock Market in Butler, they had 21 head of 665-pound steers at $404. Green Sea Livestock Auction, 25 head of 723-pound steers at $380. The average statewide on those light 7 weights this week at $367. Bowling Green, Eastern Missouri Commission Company, Friday afternoon, they sold 41 head of 776-pound steers at $360.25. In Green City, they sold 64 head of 800-pound steers smooth at $364. 60 head, 855-pound steers at Callaway this week at $344.75. Then Green Sea sold another load of 944-pound steers at $336.50. Taking a look at some heifer sales this week. 24 head of 541-pound heifers in Callaway on Monday sold at $410. The average statewide on those light 5-weight heifers this week at $391. Windsor Livestock Auction had 87 head of 585-pound heifers at $394 this week. Kingsville Livestock Auction sold 73 head of 707-pound heifers at $359.50. The average statewide $338 on those light 7-weight heifers. And then Windsor, they sold 2 loads of 804-pound heifers at $327.50. Several really impressive sales around this week on some replacement cows as well. Probably the one that caught the most attention happened last night, Thursday evening at Callaway Livestock Center. They sold 10 head of 3-in-1 first calf heifers, averaged 1,050 pounds. Heifers were rebred, had calves on their side about 350 pounds. They sold for $6,100 per pair. Now, if you take those 350-pound calves, even if they'd all been steers and sold at $5, that makes them about $1,750 a piece worth of value. That still makes those first calf heifers bred back at a value of about $4,500 a piece. No matter how you look at that, that's very impressive. Turning our attention now to the grain markets at the elevators around the state on Friday. Soybeans were 4 to 26 cents lower. We had several of the elevators this week drop their basis on Friday. I think they're starting to see some of the farmers make some deliveries as they've just got to make some room before harvest happens, and some of those elevators taking some basis so they didn't get flooded over the weekend with grain. Wheat contracts 1 to 3 lower, corn steady to 3 lower. On Friday, the corn bids in the St. Louis region 404 to 405, Kansas City at 389. Soybean bids, St. Louis 984, Kansas City 942. Wheat bids in St. Louis 482 to 487. Taking a look at the futures markets for the week, soybeans, August was up a nickel. The other contracts 1 to 2 lower. Wheat was 2 lower until you get clear out to close to next summer and the new crop, 1 to 2 cents higher. Corn bids were 5 to 7 lower for the week. Kansas City wheat 1 to 3 lower for the week, and soybean meal was $4.50 to $5.90 higher for the week. On Friday, corn contract September 382 3/4 down 1 3/4, December 405 1/2 down 1 1/2, March at 423 down 1 1/2. Soybeans for August down a nickel, 966 3/4, September 967 3/4 down 6 1/4, November at 987 1/2 down 6 1/4. Wheat contract September 514 1/2 down 3 3/4, December down 4 at 535, March down 4 at 554 1/4. Soybean meal for August up 70 cents a hundredweight, 273.40. Soybean oil for August down 78 cents a hundredweight at 52.76. That's a recap of your markets for this week. With the Missouri Department of Agriculture, this is Tony Hancock.